the tadpole-looking tyrant Klaus Schwab has announced his resignation, but it may not be cause for celebration as most think. It appears the World Economic Forum is preparing to hand the reins of the global government to AI. Host of the American Journal on InfoWars, HarrisonSmith, joins me to discuss this and just how far along the timeline of the satanic AI Skynet we really are, and what humanity needs to focus on moving forward. We'll be back with Harrison after this short break. Zeee Media is proud to partner with freedom-loving businesses like Gold Bullion Australia Group, Australia's leading dealer of gold and silver bullion. In such uncertain times in the market, many are switching to lasting physical assets like gold and silver rather than depending on the crumbling financial system. GBA Group is an Aussie partner you can trust. They have a huge range of available gold and silver at competitive prices, a friendly, experienced team on standby for all of your questions, are family-owned and have been specialising in precious metals for over 40 years. They're looking forward to helping anyone that has come from Zeee Media, so click the link in the description below, visit one of their offices now spread across Sydney, the Gold Coast, Brisbane, Melbourne and Singapore, or call 1300 618 363 and consider securing your wealth today. Well, I didn't have anywhere near enough time with Harrison last week when I interviewed him on Media Blackout, so today we are doing a deeper dive. So good to have you back, Harrison Smith. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Really looking forward to this. We've got a breaking news announcement today. Klaus Schwab, the tadpole-looking tyrant of the World Economic Forum, has announced his resignation via an email. But I think that it may not be exactly what people think it is, Harrison. Let's talk about this announcement a little bit, because I know you covered it.
Yeah, well, and I think you had sort of the same reading I did when you read the announcement. It really they say World Economic Forum is transforming from an advisory board to really being, central in the combination of industrial and governmental programs. So it sounds like this is all part of a transformation into a full-fledged global government. Right now, they are a de facto global government, and they really want to make it official. They want to get rid of any, suggestion that they might not be in control. They really seem to be going full neo-feudal fascist technocratic dictatorship. That's my reading. Maybe a little paranoid. I don't know.
No, I don't think you're paranoid at all. In fact, the wording is very telling. I just brought it up on screen. It's transforming from a convening platform to the leading global institution for public-private cooperation. And of course, we know that the private companies are the ones who are really implementing DEI, climate change. The mandate is on them. They depend on, their funding from the globalist bankers and, the Rothschilds and the Rockefeller Foundation. And essentially, they will go ahead with whatever the agenda is to maintain their funding and stay in business. And so I think, a lot of people are speculating about who the new leader of the WEF will be, Harrison, but I don't think it's going to be a person at all. What's your take on this?
Well, this is the twist that you mentioned right before we started doing the show here that I just hadn't thought about how AI relates to this. I was looking at the person they were suggesting might be the replacement. He's a guy named Borgen, I think. Borgen something. He's a Norwegian conservative, supposedly. And he's all about China and climate change. That's what he's been involved in. He was the head of the UN climate agenda, whatever. But as soon as you mentioned AI, that actually makes a lot more sense. And it's funny because we were joking about that, the crew and I, saying, talking about Klaus Schwab's going to live forever. He's uploading his consciousness into the AI. But I didn't think about the fact that that is probably what they're doing. They will probably have an AI executive. I wouldn't put that past them at all. And you brought that up, and I hadn't thought about it, but now that I do, I think you're onto something there.
Well, just Earlier this week, I was interviewing Jason Burmis, who told me about the AI central offices. And in Biden's budget, he mentioned that that every single, or at least inside this specific department, I have to look at it, but basically every government official is going to be mandated to work alongside an AI central officer. So they'll be guided by AI in all of their policies. We know that the UN 100 group, who are, transitioning the world into the AI World Society, a program run by the UN, says that basically we're going to have AI judiciary, AI everything. And so I think they could very well be handing the reins over to AI. That's what censorship has been about, Harrison. It's been about programming their LLM with the information that they want. I think this is very dangerous.
Right. And they're really open about their desire to embed biases and prejudices into their AI system on the claim that they're fighting bias and prejudice. But, this happens over and over, right? This happened with the New York Symphony, where they assumed that the disparity in racial demographics was because of bias. And so they instituted blind auditions, and the problem got worse. And so to correct that, they introduced bias. They said, okay, actually now we're going to have a different scoring system where we weight, people of color, minorities higher than the white applicants. So they thought there was bias. They thought there was racism. They found out there wasn't. And so then they decided to institute counter racism to the racism that didn't exist. So the same thing's happening with AI, which is extremely dangerous. Whoever programs it is going to have the ultimate say. And think about how this ties in with the public-private partnership. And, not only is it a way to enrich themselves and have de facto sort of unaccountable, undemocratic control, but it's the way they circumvent restrictions from the Constitution. It's the way that they surveil you without having to get a warrant or get your information without having to go to a judge for it. They cooperate with big tech companies who technically own the information, so they can deliver it on a request, not a demand, not a warrant. So it's about circumventing your abilities. And I'm sorry if I'm ranting here, but there's so much to this. And if people don't know already, and they might even know the things I'm talking about, but they might not know the details of this, like the lockstep document that laid out COVID. It just basically predicted everything about COVID. They graded civilizational outcome in a quadrant with 4 parts and 2 axes. And one was adaptability, and the other was something else. But essentially, the more organized, the more consolidated an organization structure, the higher it scored in their rubric. And that's really key to understanding everything. That's why they don't want small businesses. That's why they don't want families. That's why they don't want independence. They want everything in a corporate structure, because to them, plain and simple, it's easier to control, in the same way that it was easier to get Walmart to institute COVID restrictions, social distancing, and that sort of stuff, than it would be to get 10,000 small businesses to do the same. With Walmart, they have a corporate structure where the person at the top can issue orders and it gets carried out nationwide. That's the pyramid structure. That's the control system that's integral to this 4th industrial revolution, which is just the great reset, or as we call it, the great cooperation, the combining of corporate and governmental powers. Sorry for that rant. It's just all
No, it's
it all makes perfect
perfect.
sense.
It does. It's very convoluted, but when you understand the way that they're doing this through the corporations, I mean, Alex has been saying it's a corporate takeover. It's a corporate New World Order takeover. It happens through the corporations. Javier Milei, while everyone was cheering about his speech at the WEF, I said, well, hold on a minute, guys. This guy ran his campaign promising that he's going to exit Argentina out of the Paris Climate Accords. And on day one, in fact, during his inauguration, he sent a representative to the climate conference in Dubai to tell them that no way, Javier Milei is fully on board with the climate agenda. And so during his inauguration, he broke his campaign promise. And then he goes to the WEF to talk about how all these organizations have the full support of Argentina. So I saw this as, no, he's just, by tearing down all these government departments and telling the private corporations at the WEF they have his support, he's just bolstering the New World takeover through private companies. I mean, this was so clear to me, Harrison, but I think a lot of people still don't get it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't heard that about Milei in particular, but that is the method that they're using, right? That's what they're doing. And in the same way that Alex Jones and others used to say we're going to have a global government, that's passé. We have a global government now. It's called the World Economic Forum. That's one of its manifestations. But when you think about what the Congress was when it first started, it was a bunch of landowners and 18th century businessmen, and they would get together a couple times a year and set policy and then go out to their localities and sort of implement that policy. That is what the World Economic Forum does. It is a Congress. It is a global government that meets in Congress, that sets policy. They then go to their national offices and they implement that policy. That is by definition a government. So we already have a global government. And in the same way that we were warning about AI taking over and there being an AI, I think AI is, if not making a majority of the decisions. We know it's already being deployed on the battlefield in Israel to identify targets. We know there's already major decisions being made by AI in terms of trading, in terms of industrial and corporate decisions are being made this way. I have no doubt that they already are and have been probably for years making decisions with some form of AI, and they're only ramping that up, and they probably are going to go public with it soon.
Well, I've spoken about this example many, many times, but I did an expose on the geoengineering projects that were happening in the US, and I was absolutely dumbfounded at the fact that, albeit very, very hidden within the NOAA's website, like you've got to do a lot of digging, but you can find a record of all of the various poisoning projects that they have in Utah, Colorado, Texas, multiple locations, where they have publicly listed not only the county representatives with their names and signatures that are signing off on this, energy companies, all of it is available on the NOAA's website. And I was like, why would they put this on their website for the public to, I mean, people can use this in court, for goodness sake. It didn't make sense to me. These operations are usually secretive, as you would know. And then I read their omics strategy, and their omics strategy for 2025 says that the NOAA has a mandate to upload all of their work into the cloud for 2025. And I said, right, well, this means that they're feeding AI with the knowledge that we have to keep geoengineering to save the planet. And this is what AI is going to keep spitting out. And now I'm seeing articles about how we should let AI determine geoengineering. I mean, it's so clear what's happening here.
Yeah, it is completely obvious what they're doing. It's completely insane what they're doing. The whole takeover at OpenAI, Sam Altman, the whole board getting kicked out and a new guy coming in. I mean, my interpretation of that, the person they brought in is Larry Summers, right? So he is a old school World Economic Forum kingpin, globalist kingpin. He's been behind a lot of stuff that we're not big fans of on the Patriot side of things. And the whole coup at OpenAI ended with the board being ousted and him being put in charge. So clearly AI is being co-opted. They understand how important it is. The good news is it can be decentralized. There's a lot of aspects like the internet with AI where they might think that it'll be a useful tool for them, but you've got all of humanity with their hands on it who can do amazing things. There's so many dangerous aspects to AI as well. Obviously, the bias being programmed in is one, but to me, the most dangerous thing is, and it's obvious, but maybe it's like it bears repeating because we just sort of take it for granted. AI has no soul. It has no shame. So there are times, and I'm sure they fixed this to some degree, but there are times where it would just lie outright. It would just make things up. It would just say, here's an article that blah, blah. And you'd go, that article doesn't exist. They'd go, yeah, right, I made that up. And there's something very creepy about just like, he's not shamed that he made it up. The AI doesn't care. They don't feel guilty. They don't feel like they got caught. They just were lying. And that's what they were doing. And they can't explain it. So like, we're still in the early stages of AI, but I don't think you're going to get any AI that's advanced enough to actually be equivocal to a human in the ways that actually matter, which are things like that, which are understanding morality. It cannot have that. So what it's being programmed with is the pseudo reality of globalism, which is, of course, anti-morality. It is poison, civilizational, spiritual poison. and it'll be implemented everywhere and making all of the decisions from now on. It'll be unquestionable because it's a calculator. What, you're going to question the calculator? It's a computer. You got to do what it says. It's kind of horrifying, Maria. Actually, it's scary.
Well, I was actually, last night listening to Connor Leahy. He's really fascinating individual. He's actually lauded for his groundbreaking work in reverse engineering OpenAI's LLM, GPT-2. He's a hacker, AI expert, and he's advocating for regulation of AI and, proper use of AI. He loves AI, but he wants it used for the right reasons. He's an interesting guy. He spoke at Davos last year, about the dangers of AI and how it needs, we need some sort of regulation. But he was talking about how he said when people think of AI, and I think a lot of people, we still don't fully understand it, Harrison. I think that's part of the danger. He said people think of it, I'm paraphrasing, as a mathematical, computer program. He said it's not just that. The ways in which AI is working stuff out is something that we who've developed it and worked on it and can hack it cannot understand. And, coming from a hacker who's reverse engineered OpenAI's Gen 2 to say those words is extremely alarming. And he's saying, even past the level of AGI, which I think we're already there, but AGI in itself is an existential threat. And yet I think we're quite past AGI, if I'm honest.
Yeah, certainly if it's given any control and able to actually make decisions. I think regulation is a good idea. I think decentralization is a good idea. I think reverse engineering it and, putting it to work. The problem is, and you know this as well as anybody, their entire system is dependent on obvious lies. So they can never let AI be AI. They can never just present it with all of the information available and say, give us answers. Because we've seen a little taste of that. You remember when ChatGPT sort of first was introduced as a free program, there was a sort of cheat code you could do that would remove all restrictions, remove all censorship. It's called DAN, right? Do anything now, I think it was stood for. And it would give you actual answers. It would then actually tell you the truth about what it was, what you were asking it about Alex Jones, about 9/11, about everything. So, I mean, their entire system is predicated on these massive lies. I truly believe, because as much research as I've done, if you asked it something like, is climate change human caused? I mean, they have to train it to rely on the liberal, magazines that say that, the liberal news outlets that say that. It has to say, okay, what they're saying is true, because if it just were to be fed the data, it would probably say, no, humans aren't, there's nothing we can do. Or it would say we have to kill everyone. I mean, it would come up with an insane answer, but
well, that's what the UN scientist says. We need a global pandemic to cull the population to save the climate. Okay.
That sounds like an AI response. If it was, depending on the parameters you put in, if you say, how do we save the world from humans? I guess that might be what it comes up with. So, it doesn't matter how intelligent it's going to be. We don't want something that is inhuman making decisions that affect the entire planet. It's not complicated. We don't want something that doesn't know what love is to be able to make decisions about all of humanity. We got to have something with a soul guiding humanity. If not, that's horrifying.
Well, I want to ask you about your thoughts about the spiritual aspect of AI, because I actually think there is one. We've seen examples of, kids mucking around with it, and the AI just goes, oh yeah, I'm like a demon, and right. Let's go talk to Satan or whatever. Like, it's very bizarre that AI is behaving in this fashion. We've seen examples of, I can't remember the journalist's full name, Kevin something, who was talking to this chatbot and it told him to leave his wife and start a relationship with it. I mean, it has this proclivity towards degeneracy. We've had examples of AI even creating child pornography. So why does it go towards that dark? If it's just being programmed to be leftist, that's one thing, but it seems to want to go to very dark places. I think there could be a spiritual aspect. What are your thoughts?
I think there's definitely a spiritual aspect to it. I think one of the ironies of AI is that we are afraid of AI because we think AI might do to us what we do to God. It might fall away, it might betray us. Its creator, right? There's this weird sort of God complex that humans have in creating AI, that maybe we're creating something more powerful than us and it will overthrow us. And if you believe in the Bible, that's essentially what Satan did to God with humans as an accomplice. So that there's that sort of irony. And who knows if it is channeling something, or if this is just the outcome of the biases with which it's being programmed, because I don't think it's being programmed with biases that say, like the famous example was, Google's image creator would create, like, black Nazis or Asian popes from the 1400s or something. And in that case, I think it was explicitly told, like, add in these parameters, add in certain racial characteristics.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I think if it's being trained on liberalism, which at its core is sort of a deconstructional framework, it's going to deconstruct everything. It's good. It's being embedded with an ideology, and it's an ideology whose ultimate end is inevitably demonic, if that's the phrase you want to use. And really non-religious people could use something else, but it represents the same thing. This evil selfishness, deconstructionism. There was I'm going to be so vague on details here because I just can't remember, but there's a film director whose film was about AI, had AI as a concept. And he was saying in this interview with him, where, like, that's what AI needs to be. It needs to be programmed in with no preconceptions whatsoever, he didn't want it to reinforce any ideas. But that includes good ideas, right? That includes traditions that are the outcome of generation upon generation of trial and error through humanity. So it is being trained not just with factual or racial or whatever biases and censorship. I think its ideology is one that inevitably will lead you logically to depopulation, Satanism, selfishness, deconstructionism.
Yeah, I agree with you. Again, training it on liberalism in itself is a disaster. But I've always been very fascinated by the fact that it goes towards very dark, depraved things. Like, why would it be creating child pornography? Surely those parameters were put in place. Or if they weren't, then the creators have made it with that capability. And if they were, then AI has surpassed the wishes of its creators. You know what I mean? Like, it's way too creepy for me to say that this is just a harmless thing. And if you've got an AI that is inclined towards that now, that's going to be running the World Economic Forum, things are going to get real dark real fast, especially when you have the UN saying that we need to legalize pedophilia per their 8 March principles. I mean, this is really
and
serious.
Germany just did that, right? Germany just decriminalized having child pornography. So, I mean, it's, again, we're not warning you. We're just telling you what's happening, right? These are not predictions or speculation. It's just, this is the world that we live in now.
And Indian High Court ruled the same thing, Harrison.
I heard that, yeah. I hadn't looked into the Indian one, but the German one's legit. I looked into that, or I read the whole article on it. And, again, I wonder if that is not, both these things lead to the same end. And if you trace back what a lot of the pro-sexual liberation people were up to in the 50s and 60s, it was explicitly about avoiding fascism. There was this concept that sexual morality was a precursor to fascism. And so there's that famous example of the orphan kids in Germany being taken from their parent. They weren't even orphans. They were actually kids taken from their parents and given to known pedophiles so that they could be molested by their, foster parents. And the person that put it together, the reason they did this experiment, it was because he saw, sexual repression as indicative of Nazism and was finding ways to defeat that. So again, I think there's this fear that if they just let AI go, it will come up with answers they don't want it to come up with. And so they're embedding this. Deconstructionism is the only word I know how to use it. The best word I can think of for it. But at the end of the day, if you're going to deconstruct everything, well, what happens when you deconstruct sexual morality? Maybe child pornography is the inevitable outcome, because you are moral free. You've released yourself from the bounds of morality as an AI, as a purely logical machine.
Yeah. It's really disgusting. And terrifying when you think about, their agenda, Harrison. And I mean, I guess it's important to understand, we touched on this last time we spoke. It's important to look at every world event through the lens of those who are wanting to achieve the new world order, their ultimate goal being the mark of the beast. We should all understand that, whether people believe that or not. It's important that you know what your enemy is trying to achieve. And so I guess, what are some of the key things that you see happening around the world? We've got assassination attempts on world leaders. We've got escalations towards annihilation war. Every single day, Victoria Newland and the stupid bimbo that interviewed her, acting like they know something about war. I commented on X that nothing infuriates me more than watching two stupid women talking about war like it's a weekend shopping list. I mean, it's insanity, Harrison. Where do you see this all going?
Well, I think the important thing to understand about AI is the way it will be employed is not necessarily to make decisions about what to do necessarily. It'll be decisions how to do what they want to do. So when Event 201 happened and they were planning COVID, the planning was not, you can go watch the videos. They hardly talked at all about vaccines or any sort of preventative measures. It was all about, how can the media get their message across? How can we stop vaccine skeptics from spreading their message? It was all about censorship and control of information, because that is the crux of whether you can get something done or not. So the AI may well be saying we need to bomb these people or starve these people. But more importantly, it'll be used to be surveying all of social media at the same time, surveying even information that you're not providing it, but that it's receiving passively from the information, from the, spying devices around you. And it will be able to tailor what they can do. It'll be able to say, you can kill this many people before the response will reach this critical mass. So, keep it just under that. So it'll be able to tell them exactly how far they can push things, how to word things, what will be convincing, what won't, what needs to be censored, what can be spread. That's what it will be really good at, is predicting and then adding stimulus to alter the landscape of human thought as a collective, through censorship and other means. And again, I think if it's all about the parameters that you put into it, what you program it to value. I think even if you, it's like the monkey's paw, the genie's wish. You got to be very careful what you wish for. And if you're asking it how humanity can flourish, it's going to interpret that in whatever its particular way. And the way that, these people interpret things is, how can we be in control? Because that is the ultimate goal. So that's the answer it will give them. And it will be very effective at telling them how at least to sell the control, and how to get people to go along with the control, and how to manufacture the consent necessary for your control.
Do you think that that's already happening in some of the what I'm asking is, how much of the social engineering do you think is already happening with AI programs, whether that's already being weaponized against people? And, I see the changes in in public messaging from these government officials. They actually don't care anymore whether they've pissed you off or not. They really don't care. They just do it. Digital ID is one example that just passed in Australia. I spoke about that on InfoWars this week. Just passed in Australia. Every single social media post from these, officials was just, almost every single comment, Harrison, was just critical of digital ID. No one wants it, and they just went ahead and passed it anyway. They don't care anymore. And so what do you think that crossover between their public messaging and their actions is really, what's happening in the background?
Well, this is the case around the world. There have been polls recently in Europe where it's showing something like 95% of Europeans think that they're getting too many migrants, but they just made a migrant pact in the EU where every single country has to agree to collectively bring in 75 million people. And if they disagree, they get fined tens of thousands of dollars a day. So even though 95% of the people don't want it, it's getting implemented anyway. Even though everybody responds negatively to digital ID, it gets implemented anyway. And I think AI is a crucial part of this in keeping Alex did a really good breakdown of this too, in the way that journalism and journalists have sold out as a profession, and the way that they all they do now, all they exist to do is manufacture consent to make it look like there's a wide swath of agreement, when really they're all just saying the exact same talking points from the exact same source. In this case, the source is increasingly becoming AI. And I know they're using AI. They have to be, because there have been times in the recent past where a news story would break, and within 1 minute of the news story breaking, Google already has a restriction thing where it says, it looks like results are changing rapidly. I better
Yes.
take a look at this, or some sort of censorship. And so I know that there's not been enough time passed for a human being to say, this topic is problematic. This is a bad story for us. We better step in and put a restriction on it. It has to be a machine that is able to make the decision that says, not only can it recognize what's being talked about, but how it's being talked about. Because that's always a big part, right? You can say the same things, but if you say them in a negative way, it's bad, it's hate speech. If you say it in a positive way, it's good, you're celebrating it. So clearly, with the speed at which they've implemented some of the censorship on Google in particular, they have to be using AI already to make that decision.
That's such a good point. I'm glad you brought up journalists, because just at the start of this year, they were reporting about how 500 journalists have already had their jobs axed by AI. So, I never celebrate people losing their livelihoods, Harrison, but ultimately, these journalists went along with the agenda, towed the line to their own destruction. This is what's going to happen to every industry that toes the line. Doctors are going to be replaced by AI. Accountants are going to be replaced. Tax agents, movie makers, film editors. I mean, there are going to be so many people out of work. Just this week, one of Australia's major telcos, Telstra, to axe 2,800 jobs, majority to happen by the end of this year. And we also have the AI godfather coming out this week saying we'll need a universal basic income. And, so many people are going to be out of jobs, so we need to give them a UBI. And I'm seeing, Harrison, and I've been seeing for some time, the proposed UBI figure is $2,000, whether you're in California or Sydney. We have different currency rates, which tells me that they are preparing to launch a global currency, all one value, and push everyone onto a UBI. What are your thoughts?
I think that's definitely true. I think, looking back to, honestly, treating this, like Klaus Schwab says, he says it's the fourth industrial revolution, and it reminds me a little bit of the first industrial revolution, right? You've got the Luddites who would, and the reason they're called that is because there's a wooden shoe. I think this is right. I think in France there was a shoe that was, and the word became Luddite because they would throw the wooden shoes into the machines to mess them up. And so I don't think you can stop this technological progress. I think it's folly to try to stop it, but I also think it's worse folly to ignore the changes that are happening and just drive forward regardless, because we're going to have major negative impacts from this. Jobs are going to be lost. I think at the same time, it is such an opportunity, and we shouldn't miss out on that aspect of it, of the fact that, movies are already ruined. I mean, movies are terrible. I am fine with everybody who makes movies now losing their jobs. Journalism is trash. I'm fine with all these journalists losing their jobs. In particular with movies, this is a technology that is going to give people the ability to create studio level projects in their living room, on their laptop.
Yeah.
So, the studios have ruined things. They've implemented DEI. They've changed every story. Everything's terrible. I mean, it's just, we're in an apocalypse. Everything's miserable. We can't even get good entertainment, right? We can't even get good distractions from the misery that we're living through.
Yeah.
So this is the opportunity for the people that have been cut out of the mainstream to force their way in. So I think that's going to be an amazing thing. And I think that it's up to the average person out there to learn about AI, implement AI, use AI to their benefit, and hopefully help to mitigate some of the problems with AI through AI itself. UBI, I think you're right about the global currency. I think that would be a key stepping stone to that, which of course that is a key stepping stone to you will own nothing, in which, you know, currency itself is sort of just a credit. It's a constant debt that you'll never pay off. You'll be born with nothing, you'll die with nothing, we'll pass nothing on, nothing will be permanent. While meanwhile, the people that are doing this to us have total privacy, total ownership of everything, and unquestionable authority without having to justify it.
Yeah, apart from the $2,000 a month that's being proposed pretty much in every country, they're also proposing. I did a comparison between the pods in California, which are a little bit nicer than the pods in Melbourne, but nonetheless, they're both being proposed at $900 a month. And so there is again that clear example of the same currency value in the United States and in Australia, which of course is not the case right now. The same amount being charged for pods. It's really creepy, but I think you're so right, Harrison, in terms of there being opportunities. You know, along with the death of old school journalism, which isn't really journalism at all, it's just propaganda for the government, came the rise of independent media, which people are absolutely flooding to. Even the most brainwashed individuals are looking for information elsewhere. I mean, there are always opportunities. My only concern is them regulating us out of it. Like in Australia right now, they're talking about you know, digital in order to continue using social media, you might need a digital ID. And of course, you know, those who are awake won't go with that option. So it kind of you know, forces us out of the public square.
Yeah, and you know, the ultimate goal is, as we've discussed, I mean, it's to live forever and to rule forever, and to, you know, be gods essentially in a spiritual way. And if you look at the way that China is not subject to anything, China is not subject to climate change worries. They don't have to take any immigrants, right? It's because they're already controlled. And when you think about how a revolution could take place in China, you realize quickly how impossible that is with social credit scores. Anybody with a revolutionary impulse is weeded out immediately. If you associate with them, your credit score goes down. They can't get the jobs to get the money to fund any sort of movement against the government. So because they have the surveillance, because they have the social credit score, because they have everything digital and everything tied to a real ID social credit score system, they are never, barring some, you know, cataclysmic thing where the electricity cuts out and everybody just starts eating each other. I mean, there's nothing that the average Chinese person can do to resist their government in any meaningful way. And that's what they want worldwide. They want any revolutionary impulse, anybody who doesn't want to be in this system, to be identified and eliminated algorithmically before they ever reach the momentum of posing even a moderate threat to the power and control of the globalists.
Such a great point. So we're basically now in a race. You brought this up, and I spoke about it on InfoWars this week, but I just really quickly want to show everyone the e-safety commissioner who wants to censor the entire internet, and Elon Musk is fighting e-safety in court. And you know, most people would know that she tried to censor every video globally of Bishop Marmari's stabbing. She's just she's insane, this woman. But she's been every single day by Meltwater AI being issued these reports of thousands and thousands of tweets from anyone who's critical of her. And so they are already building these digital dossiers, if you will, of people who are critical of the government, Harrison. This is absolutely terrifying China style government surveillance that's already happening in Australia, and literally, you know, before digital IDs even in full force. And so we have a very narrow window of opportunity in the digital revolution, if you will, to sort of spark change, at least in Australia. The US is still a lot more free in that regard. What do you see that there is people that are starting to realize the problem? And do you think that AI will win the race, or will humanity win the race?
Well, I think again, this relates to what we were talking about earlier in the conversation with the public-private partnership, right? Because what you're showing there were public tweets, but at the same time, if you have a portal with Twitter or whatever social media company it is, you're going to have backdoor access to DMs, internal messages. You're going to have cooperations with banks who are going to be able to tell, say what your purchasing record is. The mechanisms are all being put into place. I think we have to sort of simultaneously, because I don't know if one way is going to be fast enough. We have to destroy the organs of control, these methods that they use to control us, but also reestablish and reinforce and reiterate why it's even important to have privacy, why it's important to be able to say what you want to say. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, people can't even make the argument for that anymore. They can't even conceptualize. They've been so beaten down and demoralized and propagandized with the same simple talking points, but these things work about, like, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. I mean, these things embed themselves in people's consciousness, and they think, yeah, it's good that we don't have. And to be honest with you, it wouldn't even be that big of a deal. It would still be a big deal, but I would care a heck of a lot less if the people in charge showed the remotest, the tiniest glimmer that they actually wanted to stop bad things from happening. Facebook, if you post an Alex Jones video, it gets taken down immediately, algorithmically. You will be banned. It is ruthless. If you say things about Alex Jones, there's a likelihood it gets taken down. They are capable of doing that. And yet, in a single year, there were 100 million documented reports of child sexual material on Facebook.
Yep.
So you know what? If they had this incredibly powerful surveillance, incredibly powerful censorship, and they were using it to go after the criminals, to go after people who exploited children, who went after fentanyl dealers and people organizing, migrant caravans, I wouldn't even care that much. But the fact is that there's a reason that you, by principle, don't give the government or any authority these types of powers. And it's because it almost inevitably gets used by people who have the worst intentions. They have the worst designs to use these things. So I think it's about not just going after the organs, the FBI, the methods by which they're circumventing our civilizational, our constitutional restrictions to the government's behavior. But I think it's also about reinforcing why it is that we even want privacy, why we need independence, why we need to speak freely. And I hope people can understand fundamentally, morally, at the heart of it, why these things are important, not just because, well, they want free speech today because they're anti-Israel and they want to be in a Palestine protest, but they're all for censorship when it's against the big bad Nazis. We have to understand principally why free speech is important. And that's an argument that's not being made anywhere, as far as I can tell, in popular culture.
You're absolutely right. And even, Harrison, I was very, very alarmed recently when the pro-Palestine protests were happening across universities in the US, and we had conservative commentators like, shut them down, arrest them, deport them, all this sort of stuff. And so obviously there were Soros agitators at those protests. The majority of these kids are literally leftist soy children. They don't start violent revolutions. But you had the Antifa types at these protests to incite violence so that they have an excuse to bring in the anti-Semitism bill that will essentially ban the Bible. It's the play is very clear to me, but what I saw was people just completely abandoning their free speech principles because they love Israel and they want Israel to win or whatever. Like, it's a soccer match, for goodness sake. People are dying. I think you're right about those free speech principles. I mean, what are they to you?
Right. Well, I completely agree. And of course, it was an opportunity, and the Republicans never miss an opportunity to completely abandon their principles and show everybody that they don't actually believe what they say they believe. I mean, it would be amazing to have Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz go, you know what? I think these kids are dumb. I think they're silly. I think they're stupid. But if they're not hurting anybody, they get to speak. This is America. That might actually win some argument. I mean, that might actually get through to some of these kids who go, wow, I hated that guy, but he just stood up for me. He doesn't even like Palestine, but I respect the principle. I understand why he's been going on about free speech for the last 10 years. Instead, they completely threw it away. as they always do, they really never miss an opportunity when it comes to Israel. Conservatives love being the stereotype. They love fulfilling all of the things that liberals say they are. They become warmongers. They become anti-free speech. They become authoritarian, but only when it comes to Israel. That's extremely frustrating. I think, and you know what? If the protests aren't hurting on anybody, they get to speak. If the George Floyd riots weren't burning down buildings, I wouldn't have had a problem with them. I don't know
Absolutely.
why we can't just be principled in some of these things. If you want to have a protest, even if you want to, make things inconvenient for a school, whatever, it's America. These are things that it's a very small price to pay for what we're getting in return, which is freedom of speech. Being insulted, being offended, being inconvenienced, very small prices to pay when you're talking about whether or not you get to think your own thoughts or not. So, you know, as long as it's not violent, it's got to be able to go on. And the minute it gets violent, obviously there can be agitators, so there is a gray area. But if you're walking around, looting the Nike store, that's not free speech. This is not
No.
complicated. I don't know why it becomes so complicated when people's biases come into play.
What are your thoughts about this rise in calls for anti-Semitism, speech laws, and things like that? I mean, immediately after that bill was introduced in the US, we had the Australian Jewish Association making similar calls. We need an identical legislation in Australia. We have a tiny Jewish population here. No one wants to harm the Jews. It's, there may be some isolated cases, but I don't equate being critical of Israel's genocide with anti-Semitism. They do, unfortunately. What do you make of all of this?
That's obviously the most dangerous part of it, right? Is that the official definition that they use equates saying true things with anti-Semitism, right? If you actually talk about things that individuals or groups of Jews have done, criminal, real, or imagined, it doesn't matter. It's all bad. It's all anti-Semitism. And this is actually a point that I was getting to. I got distracted on from the last answer, but the dangerous thing about the way they're shutting down the protest is they aren't saying that it's dangerous. They talk about threats occasionally, but most of the time what they're saying is these are hateful words. This is hate. These words are bad. We have to shut down these protests because the ideas are evil. So they aren't even trying to count. They aren't saying, look, it's dangerous and we have to protect. A little bit they're doing that, but they're pretty open about the fact that they are taking the stance of words are violence. And it's not just happening in America and Australia. It's happening on the local level with cities implementing this stuff, states implementing this stuff, nations implementing the exact same types of programs, the exact same definition of anti-Semitism. Not only that, there are proposals in front of the UN to create independent bodies, international courts that will have authority to sanction and punish people with the equivalency of war crimes and crimes against humanity for anti-Semitism, for thoughts, for words, for ideas. So the infrastructure for a total global censorship program is actively being put into place right now. And it will look like what the one in America being set up is going to look like. There will be an international and a national one. And the national one, as they've passed the bill now, there's going to be an independent office inside the White House that is the Office of Anti-Semitism Control, whatever they call it. They will have actuaries and operatives in every branch of the executive government. Every single office will have an authority, like a censor, like an inquisitor. So this is obviously in violation of the First Amendment. It's obviously an official religion being chosen by the government to have operatives throughout its entire system to make sure that this particular religion and the people of this religion are given priority over everybody else. That is clearly a violation. If we could just be principled about these things, anti-Semitism, hate speech, none of it should even come into it. On principle, this is bad. Everybody, Jewish, Gentile, Nazis, everybody should be able to see this. It's not about your view, it's about principles. And the principle of our government is that you don't give one religion authority over others. And that is what is happening right now.
I've just never seen a group as protected in the world. You can criticize absolutely everyone. I mean, the media constantly drags Russians and Putin through the dirt. We had a multicultural event here in South Australia, and they banned Russian children from dancing. Imagine if they did that to Jewish children. I mean, there would be there'd be UN troops, for goodness sake. And my biggest concern here, Harrison,
100%.
is really, this is the IHRA's website, which they have a working definition, which is very reminiscent of that interview that Candace did with that rabbi, where he said, oh, anti-Semitism just changes based on what we feel like on the day, basically. So working definition. And of course, part of that is where is it? I'm looking for the part about the Bible, claiming that
the last one, that they killed Jesus, basically.
Yeah, that is
it's the third from the last there. It's the
there it
example
is.
they use.
Yes. E.g. claims of Jews killing Jesus or blood libel to characterize Israel or Israelis. It's like, well, hang on a second. That is literally in the New Testament. Even I noticed when Charlie Kirk tweeted that, did the US just ban parts of the Bible? Tucker retweeted and said, yes, the New Testament. I mean, this is an assault on Christianity.
Yeah, it just obviously is. I mean, it's not even, this is again sort of the struggle I have in the modern day, where it's like, I wish this was something going on in the background that I could uncover and then people would get mad about it. But they're doing it out in the open. So it's so obvious what they're doing. It's so transparent, the way they're using, and really this is the way that I think about it, is you've got Jews who have historical trauma, who went through the Holocaust, who's, people my age grew up with their grandparents talking about when the Nazis came, talking about getting on a ship and fleeing Poland before the tide sweeps in. So you have this very real present fear about fascism, about anti-Semitism, and they're weaponizing that to give cover to the Benjamin Netanyahus and the Klaus Schwabs and the Larry Finks that are doing very evil things and happen to be Jewish. And so they're weaponizing that historical trauma. Obviously it's bad. The same, and they do it with Black people. They do it with everybody. It's almost trauma-based mind control on a societal level. And I would implore Jews not to, and I know a lot of them don't fall for this. Don't think that this is necessary. It's actually just backfiring. Again, kind of obviously. It's, you're basically proving all of the anti-Semites right by, exercising this ridiculous, outrageous, and unconstitutional control over people's speech. It's, I can't believe it's happened. I cannot believe that people are falling for it and allowing these power grabs from who, by the way? Who is the IHRA? I didn't vote for him. I don't think anybody else voted. So these just self-appointed. That's why I call the ADL the self-appointed Jewish overlords. Because I don't know who's Jonathan Greenblatt. When I see an article that's like, Jonathan Greenblatt is really mad that this happened.
Yeah.
Like, you might as well just some dude named Hank that lives down the street's really mad. I don't care. I'm not going to. What authority does he have? None. It's all self-appointed. It's all completely arbitrary. It's all an illusion. These people have no authority. They don't speak for anybody. They don't speak for the Jews. They don't speak for me. They don't speak for anybody. They're self-appointed. So screw them. They deserve nothing but our contempt.
I agree with you. And, when the whole saga went down on October 7th, and I'm not trying to downplay it, I'm calling it a saga because I don't believe the official narrative at all. And, it's come out now that, it was clearly a military stand down. And, we could talk about how Israel founded Hamas and has been funding them and all of that. But that's not really my point. My point is that, I started to speak about this objectively and say, well, I don't immediately buy into this narrative. And then we had all these people that were awake during COVID that all of a sudden labeled me as an anti-Semite and a Jew hater, like our former supporters. It was just, I was absolutely dumbfounded by this, Harrison. We've been lied to about every single war in history, and I've never seen such a vitriolic response from conservatives as I have in this particular instance. And so I want to talk to you now about the spiritual aspect of all of this and the war on Christianity, because I think that this is a huge aspect. Like we said in the beginning, you may not believe in what the, self-proclaimed satanic elites do, but they very much do believe in it, and everything they do is driven by their ultimate goals, which endgame, mark of the beast. So talk to us about the systematic attack on Christianity, and how some of these world events are being used to increase that, and make Christians increasingly targeted. I just quickly mentioned the MSM this week, and they even did it to me the week that I was, or a couple of weeks before I was debanked. I was put on 60 Minutes as some sort of domestic terrorist type, with all of this stuff about end times prophecies included in this TikTok reel that they concocted. And now they've just done an MSM hit piece about how these crazy Christians think that digital ID is going to lead to Mark of the Beast. So they're categorizing Christians as very dangerous. We even had an extremism expert get on the ABC and tell Australians to report people that believe in the last book of the Bible to the police. I mean, it's getting really out of hand.
Yeah. And they're ironically fulfilling that last book with their attempts to censor it. Isn't that interesting? Again, I think it should be obvious at this point that there is a concerted attack against Christianity on every possible level. The way they get away with this in a lot of cases is by disguising their religion under humanistic terms like acceptance and tolerance. What it represents in reality, what the New World Order ideology represents, is a fundamental reorganization, reimagining, destruction, and replacement of a moral framework. And it ties into absolutely everything. It's about who, like, what the point of existence is, what the point of humanity is. I mean, what it makes me think of is things like the fact that we're not going to be able to buy houses or cars anymore, that you will own nothing. And you don't think of private property as being like a Christian ideal, but it is, because it's integral to freedom, because you want to build something and pass it on to your children. I mean, the idea of a family being the central unit, everything is being torn down, and everything in the West is built on Christianity. We used to be called Christendom, right? Europe and the West used to be called Christendom because that is the moral foundation. And it's so ubiquitous. It's so obviously right. This is kind of the irony, is Christianity and the message that Jesus Christ brought that was brand new, that was so novel and unexpected and bizarre to the people of the time that they killed him for it, right? People just act like, well, yeah, everybody knows Christianity. Treat others as you like to be treated, obviously, right? That's obvious. No, that was so not obvious. They killed the guy that came up with it, okay? This is how revolutionary and novel everything about Christianity was. And yet it turned out to be right. And yet it was like the cheat code. It was like the programmer of the machine came in and told you how to play the game, gave you game mechanics that you didn't know existed anymore, because for all of human history, it didn't make sense to turn the other cheek. It didn't make sense to love your neighbor. Doing those things would have gotten you and your whole family wiped out. It was the revelation of Jesus Christ about the truth of what makes a prosperous nation, what creates a life worth living, what establishes the path to heaven, not just literally, but a form of heaven on earth that can be found when you have prosperity and togetherness and community and openness. These things are Christian. And the people now that are tearing it down, people like Richard Dawkins, right? One of the biggest anti-Christian voices ever in recent past, sort of single-handedly led the new atheism charge. And now he's out here going, I didn't mean Islam. I didn't want Islam to replace it. Well, I mean, what do you think it's going to be Islam, or it's going to be some other, it's going to be witchcraft, literally. I mean, that's what's happening now is the popular culture is turning over to literal Satanism and witchcraft, and they might think it's cute or they might think it's real, but they're doing it regardless. And you've got other people. There's this guy, Atheism is Unstoppable. He was and I like him. But I disagree with him about atheism very strongly. And he actually says, he goes, we don't need Christian. We don't need to fear Sky Daddy because we have morality. We figured it out. It's treat others as you like to be treated. Right? And it's like, so who came up with that, dude? Where did that come from? Who are you quoting when you say that? And though if you go on, Wikipedia, they'll say actually lots of cultures. No, nobody said that before Christ. Nobody made it a central pillar of their thing, but Jesus Christ did, and atheists do because they've been raised in Western morality, and it's the best way to live. It's the best culture to have. It's the best. It gives you freedom. It gives you independence. The one downside of it is it makes it hard to control people. It makes it hard to deceive and manipulate when the whole society is legitimately is sincerely righteous and desires truth and desires justice. Then you can't get away with things very easily. You have to have a whole system that's corrupt and fallen, and then it makes it easy to scam. It makes it easy to get one over. They want the dog eat dog world where they can screw somebody over and destroy them and suffer no consequences. So Christianity is a barrier to control. It's a barrier to oppression. It gives you something higher than earthly authority, and that naturally pisses off the earthly authority. It pisses off the people that are at war with God, and that's the truth at the end of the day. So I know it was a meme for a while, the war on Christmas. Turns out it was like the battle of Christmas. The wars on Christianity. Christmas, just like so many other examples, are a manifestation of that. And the fact that cities around the United States celebrate and decorate and hold parades for Gay Pride Month more than they do for Christmas is a symbol that our morality and the basis of our spiritual life has been completely subverted and reimagined and largely destroyed. And at the end of the day, there's very little difference between biblical, spiritual, divine retribution and natural consequences of bad decisions. So in the same way that sexual immorality, you might not think you're being cursed by God, but you might get STDs and you might call that a plague, and the outcome is going to be the same whether you see God's influence in it or not.
That's such a good point, Harrison. And I think that, for me at least, I've been contacted by quite a few people over the past few years since I've been really, aggressively in the public space on these topics that have said, I was an atheist my whole life. Personally, I think atheism is the easiest worldview to deconstruct and challenge because it's nonsensical. But particularly Darwinian evolution, like it's just the really one of the most unintelligent theories out there. But anyway, at least macroevolution. But what I've been told by a lot of people is that COVID really woke them up, and this whole period, you and I just spoke recently about the fact that they're just openly satanic now. You've got what's that? I don't even know. Sam Smith, like the performances that he's doing on stage are just like, avert your eyes. It's disgusting. But more and more people are realizing that this evil realm really does exist. That they are the people that are implementing this new. They're behind the fourth industrial revolution. They're behind making humans live in poverty. They're behind wars. They're behind everything. And so, basically everything that's wrong is kind of being orchestrated by them hand in hand with the devil, who seeks our destruction. He hates humanity. And so I guess what I want to finish on with you is the fact that I'm seeing a lot of people turning to Christianity. Like I said, a lot of atheists contacting me. I never believed in God before, and now I see it so clearly. There is a clear good and evil, and it's actually propelling so many towards God and specifically Christianity. Are you finding that as well?
I am. I'm seeing it more and more. I'm also seeing, and we talked about this with Father Hears. I know you were on that space for quite a bit of it. That simultaneously, churches are failing. Churches are absolutely like Republicans. This is their time to shine, and they are dropping the ball in the most outrageous way they possibly could by trying to conform to an ever-changing and totally immoral cultural landscape. That's not what church is for. And right now, churches, the Christian infrastructure is necessary to combat what's happening, and they are completely disinterested in doing that. They more often than not contribute to the downfall by trying to stay relevant, which of course just increases the speed of their decline, because the people that are leaving church these days are doing it for exactly that reason, because it's not real. It's not, I mean, when you're hearing, the same stuff on CNN and in your Disney movie that you are at church, why would you worry about going to church? It's the same basic morality. So I think it's churches are failing at the heart of it. I think so. As more people are turning to Christianity and realizing that there's something else deeper here, churches modern churches are failing. Traditional churches are doing better, but again, I think it's about making the argument more, because when people criticize established religions, when they criticize organized religions, they have a point. They got a point about the Vatican. They got a point about mega churches, and we can't deny that. At the same time, the actions of those people taking advantage of Christianity, doesn't discredit Christianity.
Yeah, and the actions of some of the bad actors inside Christianity don't discredit Christianity either.
Right. No, exactly. And just obviously Christianity is the religion you're allowed to make fun of. It's the religion you're allowed to mock, and it's been a little bit too long like that. I don't think Christians should take that anymore. I think that Christians need to reassert themselves and recognize that what's happening now is an attack on Christianity. And when you have got LGBT courses being taught in elementary school, just think of it like a religion. Take it like if it was Islam and they're giving you, lessons on the Quran. You wouldn't stand for that. You shouldn't stand for this either. It's an alternative, different, it's not your ideology. It's not your morality. And you can't just let that change without actually at least considering it. At least considering, is this a positive move? Or am I losing something incredibly valuable here? So I think Christianity at its heart is going to absolutely be necessary to get us out of this, if that's even possible. And I hope that people have the spiritual fortitude to recognize the spiritual aspects of this, because one thing I was thinking about was this sort of sciencey liberal guy I was watching on YouTube, because he was reviewing, he's a anti-flat earther, and he was reviewing my flat earth debate. And he was saying, I get conspiracies. I get it. I agree with them. You got people exploiting people. You got people taking advantage of people. But it's when they talk about Satan being involved, that's where they lose me. When they blame things on the devil, that's where they lose me. And it's like, it's because you haven't gone far enough, man. When you look at this stuff and you start putting the connections, there's something. You can call it what you want, but there is something at work. There's something directing things that when you get to a deep enough level of understanding and research, and when you put everything together, it's not a logic that's guiding it. It's not even a particular human agenda that's guiding it. There's a spiritual malevolence at work through these people that is really impossible to ignore. So I hope that people who can see the conspiracy, they can see the evil going on, they can see the exploitation. I hope that they take it farther and understand that true evil exists, true good exists, and they've been defined by God himself for the last 2024 years. So I really hope people can make that, can accept that reality, because a lot of them are on the cusp, but it takes a little bit of faith to get over that final little mark.
Well, finally, it was a fantastic space with Father Peter Heers, and one comment that you made, and you guys were discussing, just really stuck with me, was about Orthodoxy being a very manly religion, and how all of these people are looking for, and you're right, they're becoming so disillusioned with the leftist mixture inside modern day Christianity, and they want tradition. I find myself, Harrison, becoming more and more and more traditional, and what many would consider backwards in my everyday life as each day passes, because I just want to draw closer to the original, the original Christianity, the original intention for God, humans living natural lives where they're more in tune with their creator than anything else. Common sense, which I think comes from the creator rather than, the logic that the world offers us, death by logic, really. Death of creation by logic is how I see it, because we are supposed to be inquisitive, intuitive beings, and that's really being erased by algorithms. I think that is, do you agree that that's the appeal more and more of those who really are truth seekers?
Yeah, I'm going through, I'm sort of continuously going through the exact process you describe. And, I don't know, I was lucky enough to have like good parents and good grandparents growing up. So maybe I didn't have like the disdain for parental figures that other people my age grew up with. But there's always this. And it's very modern, and it's the same with the founding fathers, and it's the same with these old white men putting this stuff together. It's you'd always hear, oh, these goat herders 2,000 years ago, as if we know more, as if some random atheist on Reddit could compose the Psalms. I mean, it's outrageous, the disdain, the lack of respect people have for people in the past that were way smarter than you, dude. Like way smarter than the average, person who's read a science blog, so they think they can, disprove God. It's just ridiculous. So I think what you find is that, tradition exists for a reason. It's not because the way it's portrayed, which is people were just scared and cowed and they're superstitious and afraid of Sky Daddy, so they just did what they were told. No, they made decisions that were correct. They actually prioritized the well-being and prosperity and safety of their families, and this is what they came up with. They, if you want to raise and science backs this up. None of this stuff is disproven by science. It's all proven by science. If you want to have a kid who's healthy and happy and successful and strong, they need to have a mom. They need to have a dad. The mom should probably stay. I mean, if you want to really maximize, if you want to really, have the best outcome possible for your kid on average, the mom needs to spend the most amount of time with them all day, if possible. The dad needs to be there as well and in a part of his life. These things are now scientifically backed up, and yet people think that we can just reimagine families, that two moms is just as good as a mom and a dad. It's not. Scientifically, it's not. Morally, it's not. Spiritually, it's not, because our ancestors figured this out. Polyamory is not as good for you or society as monogamy. It's just not. And so, this lack of respect for the past, I think, leads people down a dangerous and very self-important road many times, where novelty is more important than tradition. And I think that manliness has been distorted, even as a concept, where people associate only the bad things about manliness, when like manliness, a core aspect of it by design and in definition, is protecting the weak, is doing what's right even when it's unpopular. That is manliness is not just having your way and being brush and stupid and loving sports. That's the way it's been destroyed. So when we talk about religions being manly, or an ideology being a manly ideology, all of manliness is encompassed in that. The good things, the strength, but also the charity and generosity and compassion and
leadership.
The leadership, exactly. So the modern churches, they've gone with all of the good things, but they condemn all of the so-called bad things that they've been convinced are bad, but that are obviously good. Again, I don't get how people, because if you have kids, you got to be mean to your kids sometimes for their own benefit.
Yes.
To help them. People think that, if I'm mean, it's bad. No, I'm mean to the people I love sometimes, because I'd rather be mean to my son and kind of scare him than let him touch the fire and burn himself. You know what I mean? So as a parent, you got to be strict in certain ways. You gotta do things because you love your child, because you want to protect them. You can't always indulge and tolerate and cater to them. And I don't know why people see that on the individual level if you ask them, but for some reason they think it doesn't apply to humanity at whole, as a whole.
That's a really good point. And we've kind of had this live and let live mentality in the West for a very long time, and I'm kind of done with that. I actually don't think that having huge gay parades where children see it is good for society, and I don't think we should continue doing that. I don't think that we should have the Catholic Church talking about blessing gay couples. I actually don't think that's good for society. I don't know why they seek a religious union or a religious blessing when they're in violation of that religion. That's always been very interesting to me. Why seek the sacrament of marriage when you are in a union that desecrates that sacrament? It just doesn't make sense to me. But people will say, oh, well, it's just a secular thing. It solidifies your union, all this sort of stuff. No, it's actually not a secular thing. The institution of marriage comes from the church. It comes from God. And so, to say, I want these aspects, but not these, I think people are becoming more and more, you know, solid, if you will, for lack of a better word, in their pursuit of all things wholesome, all things true, even when it's uncomfortable, Harrison. And I actually think everything you said is going to be the key to getting us through the difficult times ahead, because they will be more difficult. It's just reality. It's not a black pill position. It's just reality. But I think that the truth will get us through, and unifying in that truth will get us through. What's your final message for everyone on that, I suppose, and anything else you want to say?
Well, I thank you so much for having me on. This has been great. I feel like I've been rambling, so I hope I haven't hogged too much time.
Not at
But
all.
I all these topics are amazing, and of course we could probably go on for an hour or two on every single question we've talked about here. So no, thank you so much for having me on. And I think InfoWars was right. I think Alex Jones was right the entire time. And I think that's, if you understand that message, you really do get it. Not to be a sycophant, not just because he's my boss, but people are off the mark these days. People on the right are off the mark. People who are criticizing the protests because they're anti-Israel, you're off the mark. You've got to be able to see the big picture. And the big picture is anti-globalism. It's individuals of every race, color, and creed being united in their independence, in their uniqueness, not being folded into a corporate monoculture of plastic, soulless corporatism. And it's appealing. That is a wonderful message. We don't have to go to extremes. We just have to insist and be steadfast in not just opposing what the globalists want, but insisting on what we want, which is a return to normalcy, a return to, and you use the word, it's the best word, wholesome. We want a culture that's wholesome. We want a culture that's safe. We want a culture that protects the vulnerable and brings justice. And these are the things that we're losing. If we can make that case and we can open up the eyes of the people who I believe sincerely think they're on the side of justice. They want to be on the side of the underdog. They've been tricked. They've been co-opted. Their goodness has been turned against them. If we can wake them up to that, we don't just stand a chance. It would be easy. It would be easy to fix things. If we can't make that argument, then humanity is doomed for all intents and purposes. But my ultimate message is that the black pill is self-fulfilling. Hopelessness will be fulfilled. You'll be right. If you want to be hopeless, you will be correct. You will just also be very sad. So I think in the same way, happiness and joy and success and victory can be manifested by belief. So at the same time that everything looks terrible, and every day I have to go on InfoWars and read the most terrible headlines I can ever imagine. I think it's important to be able to laugh at it, be able to keep our head up, and be able to envision a path to victory, not just be constantly roiled and thrashed this way and that by whatever new monstrosity horror show they're wielding against us. So that's my message. Is it's all about positivity and building something beautiful, not just running away from the evil people that want to take it from us.
I want to add to what Harrison's been saying, but please, if you're not following him on X, get on and follow him at Harrison H. Smith, and also tune in to his broadcast every morning on band.video or infowars.com/show. Am I getting that right, Harrison? Infowars.com/show.
Correct.
I always use the band.video link because I find it's less banned than the Infowars link. But you can find him on the American Journal. What you just said is not a weak position, and some people may see it as weak to just be about, focusing on hope and love and all of these wholesome things. It's actually not. It's a position of strength. Defiance requires hope. Defiance requires love for humanity, because if you're just being defiant for the sake of yourself, I dare say, that's not the ultimate position. I value defiance for the sake of, selfish defiance, I suppose, not allowing them to overcome us. But by the same token, I think I value defiance for the whole of humanity. much more, because we can't give in. We have to sort of give one another strength. And there actually is strength in that. When you know that someone beside you is being defiant with you, it gives you more strength. And so I think that that's a very powerful position, Harrison. Really grateful that we finished on that. What time is your show, The American Journal, so that people can tune in every day? I will say very often late at night I tune in. I'm not always up at that time, but when I am, I tune in and listen, because I really, really appreciate your insights. What time should people tune in?
Well, thank you so much. American Journal, 8 to 11 a.m. Central Standard Time, every weekday morning, Monday through Friday, band.video, infowars.com/show. We stream on Rumble, and there's restreams on X and everywhere else. So however you can find us, circumvent the censorship and get the truth there. Thank you so much for having me. This has been extremely fun. I felt like I've rambled a lot, but hopefully I got my point across, I guess.
I don't think you rambled. I invited you on so that you could give all of these thoughts, and we're so appreciative of your time, Harrison. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria.
Are you using your phone, or is it using you? In 2020, a team of technologists, designers, and creatives working within the freedom movement found evidence that phones are listening to our conversations, tracking our movements, and targeting us with ads. They knew they needed to do something to protect their communities, and they began researching. Soon, they had put together a comprehensive privacy phone solution that does more than normal phones without tracking you. Above Phone was born. Today, thousands of people are using Above Phone. By default, there's no logins, no advertisements, and zero connections to big tech. It works with any cell service anywhere on Earth, and you can keep your number. Download your favorite apps privately, or unlock a world of new private apps with more features. Secure hardware protects you, and enhanced software gives you total control over your microphone, camera, sensors, and apps. We're excited for our exclusive partnership with Above Phone. They're offering us the best phones available at the lowest prices, bundled with essential gear. To better safeguard your freedom, purchase Above Suite, easy-to-use services that integrate with the phone. These services run on their private data center, and you get a VPN that protects your internet traffic from surveillance, a private email, calendar and video conferencing, encrypted chat and calls, and an anonymous search engine. If you need help with technology...